This is Moodle Quizzes 101. It is not intended for those of you who are already using Moodle Quizzes extensively. It is for those of you who don't use Moodle Quizzes and want to start using it for either your formative or summative assessments in your class. I use Moodle Quizzes for all of my blended and flipped assignments. I use it every 15 minutes or less in my class as a formative assessment to make sure they got that section of an instructional lecture before moving on to the next section. I also use it for quizzes before taking any summative exam to find out where my students are as well. I'm going to be using this blank Moodle course to talk about Moodle Quizzes today, and as I go through it, I'm going to be pointing out some things on best practices as far as maintaining and doing your questions in a Moodle quiz. But I'm not going to get into those advanced question types. That's going to be the Moodle Quizzes 202 and 303 that are going to come after this particular class. Okay, so as you can see, it's a blank, empty Moodle course that I'm looking at right now. I haven't even named chapters. It still says topic 1, 2, and 3. And I'm going to use topic 2 like that's my chapter 1. So I'll go ahead and name it chapter 1. And I'll set up, or 12. And I'll go ahead and set up some stuff inside this chapter they're going to use. So to add a Moodle quiz, you just hit add an activity or resource and choose quiz. You may not see all these items that I have available. We have it broken down to only showing 5 things until you finish your first Moodle training, and then you get more and more things that show up as you go. These are all the things that you can see, but I'm going to go with Moodle Quizzes, realizing quiz is the name that you can use for any assessment using any variety of question types. It doesn't have to be a quiz, it can be a test, it can be an exam, whatever you want to call it in your particular class. And as with anything in Moodle, once I click on the item, it gives explanation of what that item is here on the right hand side. I'm going to go ahead and say OK to add it, or add, and then I'm going to start making this first quiz. Now, if you didn't know, anything as a red exclamation point is required. Nothing else is required. This first part of the Moodle quiz is I'm going to go through the settings on the quiz. So I'm going to name it Chapter 1.1. I don't teach anything about gravity, but I'm just calling it Gravity Basics. In all my Moodle things, I make them numeric, so it's chapter 1 like this. I make it short. I don't write out chapter. I put CH. That's because it's going to show up in the grade book. I also make it not just chapter 1 and the name. If it's the first quiz, I make it 1.1, because then in my grade book, I order things by 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, so it shows up in the same order that the students took it in. Okay, so I can add a description here if I want to. In the case of my flipped learnings, this is where I put the entire lesson, YouTube videos, links, hyperlinks. All the instruction is there in the description before they enter the quiz. So the quiz is the lesson itself, and it's the evaluation on the lesson as well. Now, if it's just one that I did in class and I'm going to give them a basic quiz, then I don't really have to put anything here other than maybe I could put closed notes, open notes, no internet, internet's open. Whatever you do in your particular class would go in there. But like I said, I've got a bunch of stuff in this section. Okay, I'm going to hit expand all up here in the top right so that all these items expand so that I can go through them one at a time. Okay, timing. When do I want it to show up on the calendar? If I want it to show up on the calendar, and some of my things like tests, I obviously want to show up on the calendar so they don't come in, and which they'll still do, and say, what are we doing today, Mr. Poole? They should know in advance that they have a summative exam, obviously. But the ones that I do throughout my class that are part of the formative evaluation, there is no open and close. It doesn't show up on a calendar because I don't want it to show up on the calendar. If I enable open the quiz, that means no one can take it until that date and time. But if I don't enable it, it means it's just available and they can take it anytime. There's no restrictions. If I enable opening, I can click on the calendar and say, hey, I want it to be tomorrow and I want to do it at the beginning of the morning and I open up for my first block class perhaps. And along with that, I can also say when I want a quiz to close. Now, here in the high school, we have block schedule, and you may say, well, I've got kids who take the quiz Orange Day, and I've got the quiz who take it Brown Day, and I don't want the Brown Day kids to be able to take it before the Orange Day kids or vice versa. I'll get to that here, and that's why I password protect my quizzes, so that when I was on, and I'm not currently, but when I had hardware, both Brown and Orange Days, I had on one case a student take the quiz a day early on her own outside of class when I didn't want her to, because it wasn't an open note, it wasn't open internet, and that particular student got 100 on that form, or actually it was summative assessment, when the person's average was at most is 75, and it made me question whether that person had help or used outside materials. Anyway. So realizing that just because this says a date on here, I put it on my first day that the students would take it, having them realize that if I don't have class that day, it means it's the next day. And I password protect them, and I'll show you how I do that. If I say I want to close the quiz, that means as of that date and time, so I could say, hey, they're going to take it Friday and Monday at 2:30, I know they're done because class is over. I want to close it then and nobody else can get in. They can't go into it, and at that time the quiz closes and is automatically graded. So if a student started a quiz and didn't finish the quiz and close it out, then it would automatically say, okay, you're done. So that's what that setting does. I don't use that one very often. And like I said, I only use this one on the opening the quiz on summative things that I want them to make sure they know about advanced, because I don't do pop things. Okay, so that's what those are. Time limits say how much time they have. I might say 80 minutes, for instance, on my semester exam, or 78 minutes, so that at the end of class it's graded and they're done. It also teaches them time management with quizzes, and you can extend it later if you want to, but depending on how you set it up, you can say that it's graded as soon as it's done. You can see there's this show more button that I just hit. It shows like this. I hit show more. What happens when the time is expired? And the default is open attempts are submitted automatically. You can say there's your grace period, or attempts must be submitted before time expires, or they are not counted, which I never have done. That seems like a strange one. Oh, you didn't turn it in, so it didn't count. I guess you could do it for a homework assignment, but that's not. I leave it here for open attempts are automatically submitted, so it is graded. Okay, what category are you going to put it in? Like I said, this is a new course. There are new grade categories. I'm going to leave it uncategorized. I probably should have added some categories before this. Grade to pass. Now, this has nothing to do with passing your class. If you're using restrictions to say you have to do this thing before you can do that thing, then this means if you say you must pass this in order to move on, so you could say it needs 80% to pass, which has nothing to do with passing your class. Most people don't use this at all. And then attempts allowed, unlimited, or up to 10 attempts are allowed. Usually most people say either one or unlimited if it's a formative thing that they're going to be able to do over and over again. You could say like this, attempts allowed, unlimited, and then it gives you options for the grade. Yeah, you can take as many times as you want, but only the first one counts. Not sure why you would do that. Or only the last one counts. Honestly, that's what I do. If you take it again, if you had a 90 and you take it again and get an 80, now you've got an 80 and you have to figure out what you got wrong. That's my technique, not necessarily what a lot of people do. Some people do average grade, and then many people just say whatever your highest grade is. If you allow multiple times, that's what it'll do. If it's only one, that goes away because it's just going to use the one that you got. Okay, Layout by default is smaller. You can make it bigger, and here's what it is by default. By default, and this is the way we set it up here at our school, every question is a new page. And that means that the student next to you can't see anything if they're looking over at your desk, but the one you're on. And because all my questions are randomized and I have a classroom full of kids, the chance of you sitting next to someone on the exact same question is relatively limited. Less than a 5% chance depending on the number of questions in the case of my semester exam with 50 questions, even less than that, obviously. So that's set that way. You can paginate however you want to, up to 50 questions. However, every question works best because they can't miss a question. The one that comes up is the one they're doing and have to go to next to get the next question. That's why it's set up that way, and that's why it's by default not something you can see. Navigation free, and you can hit the question if you don't know what that means. It means they can jump around if they want to, or you could actually say sequential. You must do it in the order that you see them. There may be a reason to do that for some people. I leave it free, and that's because I teach kids that if they come to a question that's hard, they can mark it, go on, come back. So, and then how do you want feedback? I say deferred feedback. That's the normal meaning. After it's over, you can see whether you got it right or wrong. And I'm not going into the other settings because this is Quizzes 101. And these options, by default, are the ones you probably want them to see. Immediately after the attempt means within 2 minutes of them saying submit it, so they can only see the attempt and how many points they got. After that, they can see the feedback. And then when it's closed, they can see what's correct. Now, you might say, hey, I want them to know whether it's correct or not, but I don't want them to see the right answer because I want them to know what they got wrong, but know what the right answer is because I allow them to take it several times. Mine just shows the points, but there's nothing wrong with that. The difference between this and this is very little. If they see it's worth 2 points and they got 2 points, they know they got it correct. Okay, appearance, show the user's picture, blah, 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 all this stuff. I'm going to skip over that. Extra restrictions on attempts. Okay, so here at Trail, the default is that it should put in 10.66. That's the beginning of all of our network addresses here at Trail. If you want a student to only be able to take it at Trail, and that was taken out due to COVID so students could take tests at home, if you only want them to be able to take it at school, you need to have that 10.66 in there. If you want them to be able to take it home, it needs to be not in there. So that's an important one. It doesn't default to go in there anymore because of COVID and the fact that we need to be able to do a lot more stuff at home. Require password. There isn't one, but if you want to enter one, and I do this, I'm going to enter the password of, I'll just say pi. Okay, if I want to see it, I can go there. It's case sensitive, by the way, so you have to know the password is pi to enter this quiz. Why is that important? If I want it to be done only in my class, only when it's time to be done, and I have it set up to open up yesterday, they still can't get into it because they don't know the password. And when the students are in my class and they're all in the quiz, I can change the password so that none of them can tell their neighbors or their friends the password so they can get in it tonight at home. So if you have kids rotating between classes, brown, orange days, in our cases, and you want to make sure the brown day kids don't tell the password to the orange day kids, just change it after they're done. Okay. This feedback is things like, great job. You can type in whatever you want to in there. That's what they see for getting different grades. So if you want to say something like, great job here, and the grade boundary for that is a 90%. So 90% or above, they see great job. And I can add more. You can see, so between 0 and 90 now, they're going to get no feedback. But if they get 90 or above, they're going to get great feedback. And you can add more breakdowns. Just like that, I hit add more. And now I can say 80% or above. Good job. And now I've got these other blanks. It's just going to ignore them because I didn't put anything in it. Okay, back down here. Availability, show on the course page. Yes, I want it to show up. You could hide it right here. That's the default. And restrict access and competencies, that is advanced stuff. So I'm going to hit just save and return to course. It didn't like the fact that feedback boundaries must be between 0 and 100. Oh, I didn't put % there. Bad on me. There we go. Sorry about that. There we go. Save and return to course. So now I've got my Gravity 1.1 Basics quiz. That's just the setup. Now we want to go in and make our questions that are in this quiz. So I'm going to go ahead and click on there, and it says no questions have been added. In order to, what we just did was edit the settings. Now we want to edit the quiz, which is the same thing as this button here. They both do the same thing. So I edit the quiz. Now I have the ability to add questions. And this is where I set what the quiz is worth. It says maximum grade on this is 10 points. If it's a test and I want it to be worth 100, I can make that worth 100 points, and I can change that anytime I want to. This is also where I say, hey, I want my questions shuffled. I don't want them to show up sequentially. I want every student to get a different experience, so I want the questions shuffled. That's where I do that as well. And to add quizzes, I go right here to add. I have options here. I can make a new question. I can add them from my question bank, which I don't have one anymore. Or I could say a random question, which is from the question bank, which I don't have anymore either. You could do random questions from particular sections of your question bank so that every single time they come into a quiz, they get different questions than they did last time. You might want to do that for extra credit. I don't think doing that for a graded thing and not knowing what questions the student are going to get is probably a great idea. So I'm going to hit add a new question. So I have a bunch of different options. We're going to do only the most basic ones today. The advanced ones are going to be the subject of Moodle Quizzes 202 and 203. Okay, so the first one that most people use is the multiple choice question, which is right up top. I'm going to click add. Now, category. It says default for Moodle, and I've got Moodle's the name of this course, by the way. So yours would say that course. I've got an issue here. I really think best practices is to never use the default for your class and to start from the beginning making categories that you put your quiz questions into. How do I do that? I go right down here to categories, and I'm going to add a category. So I go down to the bottom. You can see there's already some categories. I'm going down to the bottom to add a category here, and I'm going to say that category name is Chapter 1. I'm being very original here. And I click add a category. So now Chapter 1 exists inside of my Moodle category right here. Here, okay, so question categories for the course, Moodle. I shouldn't have named this one Moodle. It's kind of confusing. But inside there, you can see Chapter 1. And if I want to add another one, I could add, while I'm doing it right here, I can add Chapter 2. And now I see I've got Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. And maybe because I'm starting to use this, I go and add all of my chapters that I have in my class in there. You don't have to put chapter. You could put the names of the sections. You could put it over gravity and biomes or however you want to organize your particular course. But having categories in your course first is really, really important. And I'm saying that as someone who did not do that. I slowly made questions and stuff, and all of a sudden I had 200, 300 questions that now I've got to sort my way through. What a mess it eventually became. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and go to my hardware class and go to my categories over here and kind of show you my organization method. So if I go to question bank over here and I go to categories, you can see I've got a Chapter 0 and then I've got a Chapter 1, and inside Chapter 1 there's 49 questions about how computers work, There's one essay, 32 that I don't use. These are additional ones. So I got these 49, an essay here, and some unused questions that I moved over there later. In chapter 2, I've got 36 questions plus 3 essay questions. I have those aside for a specific reason. So you can see I've got these organized in my class, and that didn't happen easily because I didn't do it all at the same time. So let's go back into my quiz and say edit quiz and go to add a question again. So now when I add a question and I add a new question, I'm going to add multiple choice and click add. I'm not going to have default for Moodle. I'm going to say it's a chapter 1 question. So now this question is going to be put inside that kind of folder for chapter 1. Okay, question name, students never ever see. It's for you to know what or how you want to organize those. So here's what I have on all of mine. I have the chapter dash the indicator that it applies to. So in my case, I have the indicators laid out for my course. Let's say this is indicator 1. So I'd have 1-01. What is gravity? And that is my question that I'm going to make. So what is gravity? So I can have that as my question. Oh, by the way, question text, this is what students do see, is the question text here. So I see this. It allows me to easily see what indicator, obviously I'm making this up as I go, that this question applies to. I use that later to make sure, hey, I went over indicator 1. I can easily grab questions for indicator 1. When I do my semester exam, I want to make sure I hit all the indicators and not one far harder than another. So that's what that's for as well. Okay, default points. The more a question is defaulted, the more it's weighted in your test. So, for instance, all my default points for true-false questions are 1, for multiple choice are 2, and for matching might be far more. A matching question might hit multiple different things that I'm getting feedback on. And so I might want to have it weighted heavier. This can always be changed, but because it's multiple choice, I'm going to say 2. Okay, now I don't have to give many feedback. So I'm going to go down. 1 or multiple answers. You have 2 choices. Either you say there is 1 correct answer, or you say you can pick any number of answers. The most normal thing is 1 answer only. I'm going to go over that first, and then I'm going to go over true or false, and we're going to look at multiple answers allowed in 2.2. So 1 answer only is the normal. So I'm going to put the right answer. Oh, by the way, it has by default checked shuffle the choices. So every student gets A, B, C, D differently. So even though I'm going to say this first one is worth 100%, that means it's the right answer. Not everyone's going to see that as A. If you look at the student next to you, the right question could be D. You get the idea. So I put in here, and this is a full Moodle text area that I can put pictures, diagrams, hyperlinks, videos, anything that you can use in Moodle, you can put in this box right now. So yes, you can just put text, but you could say, identify the picture of gravity, or gravity makes the most sense, or whatever, and you could have multiple pictures in yours, diagrams, hyperlinks, whatever. Anything you can put in a Moodle text box, you can put into an answer choice for a question. Okay, I don't teach gravity, so I went and grabbed this off the NASA site. I didn't like the NASA one. I went off the Google Dictionary. So I put in the force that attracts a body toward any other physical body having a mass. I'm going to say that's the most correct answer on here, and then I can fill in any other options with any other number of points as well. In other words, you can give partial credit. So you could say in choice number, Z, I didn't mean to do that. So I could go and say something somewhat correct in here. Force that moves things to other things. I don't know. It sounds good. And you're like, well, that's kind of, sort of, maybe. Okay, we'll give them 50% for that one. It's not the most correct thing. What a plane has. No, that's not the answer. Okay, so you get the idea. So I can put any number of answers in. At least one of them has to be worth 100%. Any other ones can be anything less if you want to give lesser partial credit on things, but at least one has to be worth 100%. And when I'm done, I just go down to the bottom. Now, you can also see these feedbacks that are down here as well. These feedbacks are what, after the quiz is over, you can have it say if they answered that question. Great job. That's not the answer I wanted. Or whatever else. I apologize for that. There we go. But that's what it is. That's the feedback that they can see when they're taking that particular question. And when I'm done, I say Save Changes, and that question shows up now inside my quiz. Then I can hit Add. I can say New Question again. This time I'm going to do True, False. I'm going to say Add. I'm going to see it automatically goes to the last category you did. So I'm going to do 1.1. I know nothing about what questions I'm making right now. Again, I put chapter and indicator, and I use 2 digits because I have more than 2 indicators. And so this becomes a true or false question. I always have that as default 1, and you have to say what the correct answer is here. So I'm going to just say the correct answer is false. Is the inner. There we go. Gravity is the, I spelled energy wrong. There we go. Energy we give off as heat, and the answer to that is false. So that's all this is true, false. You say what the right answer is. Again, you can give feedback for, hey, if they said true, or feedback if they said false, and then I hit Save Changes, and I've added another question into my bank. By the way, all these questions are going into my bank as I make them, and into this quiz as well. Now you can see the points over here. These are the default points. I can always change them. If this one's really important, I can say this is 5 points on this quiz, and this one is 2 points on this quiz. I can always change that. By the way, when I hit that, I have to hit the Enter key. It says Escape to cancel, Enter key when finished. If I hit anything other than the Enter key, if I tab out of it, you see it didn't do anything. I have to hit the Enter key to make that count and make that change. Okay, so right now, I'm going to say it's worth 10 points again. And it automatically is going to shuffle the questions for whoever gets it. And I could say my quiz is done. Now, just so you know, the quiz locks as soon as the very first person takes the quiz. So I can't make changes to questions. I can't make add or delete questions as soon as anybody's taken this quiz, which means if I use it this year and I want to make it slightly different next year, I can't do it. Exactly. So how do I do that? I'm going to go back to chapter 1. Let's say I use this quiz and I just want to make a couple changes to it from last year. All I do is I go down to and I say duplicate. It says copy. Then I'll go here and I'll delete this one. Yes. And then I'll take out the word copy. You got to hit enter again. And now I have by the way, the quiz goes in the same category, the same points. It's exactly the same, but I've done 2 things. I made it so I can edit it again if I gave it last year. And I just lost all the data that was on the other one on how many people got things right or wrong on the test or the quiz. So there's some downfalls of copying, but I don't really care how, I shouldn't say don't care, but I care about how my kids did this year, not necessarily how they did last year. Now, I may want to look at say, oh, well, which questions did they have the most problem with last year? And maybe you want to tweak those questions or make sure I go over those questions better before I do the copy thing. Is not a bad idea at all, but I can't change anything unless I copy it first. I'm going to go to my other class and show you kind of what I mean by looking at, and I don't think I've already recopied them all, but let's go and look at one from chapter 5, which is the chapter I'm on right now. Well, you know what? I'm going to go to chapter 6, so I'm one chapter ahead. So if I go to my chapter 6 test, which we call fight because you can see 5 people have already attempted this one. So if I try to go to edit the quiz, I don't have the ability to delete. Like on this one, if I go to edit the quiz, I can trash questions and I can edit the questions. On this one, I can edit the questions, but I can't delete the question. I can't make significant changes once people have started taking it. I can make this question weighed nothing, which you may say is the same as deleting it, but I can change the weights, but I can't delete questions and modify the test for the new students. That's just something you have to get over, and I have to make a copy of it for it to work. I'm really done showing the basics of tests. The last thing I want to show you is the results. So you can't see any kids because none of the current kids have taken this test, but I can still see the statistics on it because even though nobody from this year has taken it, so there's no names, I can see the 5 students that took it last year, and I can see the statistics on which ones they did well at, which ones they didn't do well at. This class was really small last year. I only had 1 section versus 2 that I have this year. Anyway, I can go through this one and see which one has the highest or lowest facility index. Unfortunately, with this version of Moodle, I can't sort on it. I used to be able to click on this and sort on, oh my gosh, oh no, I made it smaller. I didn't sort on it. I thought I just sorted on it. So I can see that, for instance, only 60% of the kids or my students got this question right. And I may want to take a look at this one and say, what could I have done differently to make this questions better? Now, this is not a question we've gone over how to make yet. We'll do this in subsequent things. This is a drag and drop, so students would drag up answers into, and you can see this one's made so the options go away as they drag them up into the question. This is drag and drop. It's a great way to do questions. And this one's made so that students who are on an IEP or have reading issues can. RAM is something we need to make our system run well. Often people can. Hey, you get the idea. All the questions and all the options are recorded on any questions that are given to any of my 504 or IEP students, and that's the subject of another thing altogether. I've sent out a video on that in the past on how to record into questions, but that way my students are on 504's IEPs. They don't have to have an aid read to them. They can just click on there, and there's sentence number 2. How much RAM can a 32-bit operating system normally utilize? And I feel that most of them can read the numbers. Well, I just happened to drag the right one up there, didn't I? You can see this question is worth 2 points. I could have made this one worth more because look, they're answering 1, 2, 3, 4 things, and that's a good example of when the default points may not be the best option. But that's one of the things that only 60% of my students got correctly, or it was only answered correctly 60%. So you could have somebody who got all of it wrong. Anyway, since it's worth a number of points. This one, however, abysmal. 20% of my students got this one right, and that's why the statistics are great, because I can go down through here and see which questions did I not go over it well? Did I not phrase it well? What exactly was the problem with this question? RAM is refreshed by the blank, which is part of the chipset on the motherboard. I need to remember to go over that again this year, right? Maybe I didn't talk about the memory controller, or maybe they weren't paying attention, but to have only 20% of your students, or in this case, one student, get the answer right, shows a lack of good instruction probably on my part on this particular one. It was obviously in the reading, but did I go over it well enough? That's what is great about these statistics, and that's why I do these now every 15 minutes of lecture, of instruction, and then after they do them, I go right here and say, what did we not understand? I immediately know if this was that. This is actually a summative example, but nobody got that I said that was the memory controller. Okay, one person did. In the class, I need to talk about it again before we move on. And that's the beauty of using Moodle Quizzes for formative assessments as I go throughout my class. And when I say I do them during the instruction, you can see, you know what, I'm going to make this look a little prettier by switching my role to clean course view. That this is when I'm teaching. There's one, there's one, there's one, there's one, activity, activity, activity. There's one, there's another one that they have to do well on before they even see the project open up. In all of my course sections during these class activities, these are all small, formative, sometimes 3 questions, assessments that students do throughout the course of the instruction. And I stop and I say, how do we do? Does everybody get what I was talking about? Are we taking notes? That kind of thing. They're my stopping points to make me stop. And so Moodle Quizzes aren't just for summative things. You can use them for formative things throughout your instructional day. On my smart notebooks, I now actually have a big red X to remind me that this is where I need to stop in order to go to that assessment, because I have in the past said I'm going to do this, but then I just get off on a tangent and I get running and I don't do everything or stop for those assessments like I may have wanted to. So I'm going to go to chapter 4 since that's the one I'm looking at. There we go. So if we look, you'll see these big red marks stop. And that means I have to stop, and the students are going to take a quiz now to go over what I just talked about. And then I talk for a while, and then there's a stop. And I'm going to stop, have the students take this formative assessment, and then we're going to talk about the results and what we need to maybe go back and go over again. And then I'm instructing, and then I stop again. So I have these big red don't go any further things built into my class, so that all these formative assessments are things that I make sure I do, and then we go back and talk about. One of the things that I didn't talk about in the multiple attempts, and I'm going to go back here and do that, is timing. So I'm going to expand this. So I'm going to say, where's our multiple attempts? No. Basics, attempts, there we go, multiple, unlimited. And now I've got some other options down here on, not on layout. There we go. It just showed this down here on restrictions on attempts. That's where I put my password. It also now allows me to put time restrictions in on things. So on this, if I'm doing it in class, I'm going to say you can't do this for 10 minutes so that I see your first attempt when we go to talk about it. And then it only has a delay between first and second, and then a delay between all other ones. And I could say, well, from then on, you can take it every 5 minutes. Or I could say, you can do it in days or weeks. So I could say, you know what, you can only do this once an hour, and you have to wait 20 minutes, so we're on to the next lecture thing before you can take it again. Because I've had students in class literally keep taking the quiz to try to get a better grade so that I don't use their time instructing, and they just move on. So I was like, oh, well, I'll just put a time limit on it, and they can't do that. I went over a lot today on the setting up of Moodle Quizzes. I really talked a lot about philosophy of how I can use quizzes in a classroom. and only 2 kinds of questions. The rest of the Moodle quiz classes that we're going to do are going to really just be about those other kind of questions that I can add into my class. Multiple choice and true or false and really matching are really easy. Some of these other ones are kind of easy, but I want to spend more time going through that, and I feel like I've gone through enough today to talk about how to get you started on Moodle quizzes. Thanks for joining us.